Alright, so this is a review for the Nickelodeon Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I actually finished watching this in about a week. I bought the first two volumes at Walmart, and I went and had me a 5-day weekend this past week, and kind of went while I was away. I watched the remaining episodes on YouTube, and I've come to really fucking like this show. This is not as good, and of course, at my age, this is just me speaking strictly from my preferred bias. This is not as good to me as the 90s series was. This is not as good as what I've seen of the 2003 series, but it is still enjoyable. I'm not going to say it's alright, but it's good. It's really good. When I started out watching the show, which took me like 3 days to do, because there were like 8 episodes on the DVD, the first volume, and it took me 3 days to get through it, because when I was watching the first episodes, I got immensely bored by it. A lot of that had to do with my bias and the fact that, these are not my Turtles. This is not what I was, used to, and part of that because I bought the entire late 80s, early 90s series in a battle van for about $80. I went through the first couple of seasons, and I wanted to swap it up on a whim, and this is definitely not the Turtles that you grew up with. And I think part of the reason why this didn't mesh with me so well at first is because that I don't have kids. And there are things that this show does to kind of nod back to what went into the original series, and there's some things that were adapted in the 2003 series that show up in here. Not all of them I've seen from that series. But I think what this is that those nuances are meant for the parents. I'm 28. People around my age or younger, at least up until probably that were kids in 91 and 92, who grew up watching this, and most likely you're married and have kids now. This is kind of to help them fall into the show and enjoy it while their kids just become absorbed by it. And I kind of appreciate those nuances a lot more now that I kind of have stepped back and thought about it in this mindset. The things that I got bored by in the first part of the series are kind of problems that I've addressed in the past, so why I didn't like Teen Titans or why I didn't like Ultimate Spider-Man. There's a lot of silly stuff in there. There are these kind of reaction anime type faces that most everybody, especially Mikey, will do. They'll do like these Ultimate Spider-Man Doug Funny dream skits that happen in the middle of stuff, and it's just really random stuff that kind of irks you to begin with. And surprisingly, there's no breaking of the fourth wall in this show, which I didn't really realize until just now. So, getting over those things, the show does become much better as it goes on, and you'll, especially if you still have qualms about that, you'll fall into enjoying the show once the Turtles get into their first actual encounter with the Shredder. Story-wise, we're kind of starting off, and the episodes primarily deal with the Krang for, let's see. Out of the 2 volumes that I bought from Walmart, that's 14 episodes, and I think this is a 26-episode season. The Krang are usually the primary antagonists for the first half of the season. The stuff that they do with the Shredder is kind of built up to. He's there, but he's just making his way over from Japan to New York, and there's about maybe a total of 2 or 3 episodes before actually meeting with the Shredder that the Turtles have in dealing with the Foot or dealing with people that work for the Foot. The only exception that they have to this is an episode where they deal with Baxter Stockman. So before that, let's get into the Turtles themselves. Strangely enough, when I first heard Donatello speak on here, I realized that the guy who's doing his voice did Raph in the 90s series. And for whatever reason, they don't have the other three voice actors for that. Now, supposedly in the second season, they're going to be doing a thing where they bring in all of the voice actors from the 90s series and just do kind of a Turtles Forever thing in the second season of this show. Leonardo is done by Jason Biggs of American Pie fame, which I was surprised that they scored him in here. And we have Sean Astin, Sam from The Lord of the Rings, doing Raphael's voice. I have no idea who's doing Mikey's. The Turtles themselves are pretty much what they've been in the past, but there's just some things that they've either toned down for the show or they've just kind of put a spin on to be able to slightly differentiate itself from the series that have come in the past. Particularly, they do this with Donatello. Now, Donatello is still the techno geek of this, but he's strangely developed an attraction to April O'Neil once she's brought into the show. And they've also downplayed April O'Neil in this. She's not a news reporter. She's just a 16-year-old girl who, in the pilot, her and her father get kidnapped by a bunch of crane droids who are running around the city and transporting mutagen somewhere. If anybody remembers the episode, the Metamorphosis episode from Gargoyles, where Brooklyn saw Maggie the cat for the first time and he just kind of latches onto her out of affection because she was in trouble, this is pretty much what happens with Donatello. And throughout the course of the series, they become good friends, and he's usually doing things to try and impress her. And the silliness kind of starts out annoying at first, but then it just kind of grows on you a little bit. Leonardo is himself. Raphael is his hot-headed self. Mikey is himself, although more crazy than usual. And Splinter is the movie Splinter from the 2007 TMNT movie. They do some interesting tweaks with his backstory. Instead of the boy who bought the turtles from the store, he's the one who bought the turtles when he came to New York. And he just so happened to see a bunch of the crane droids dressed up as Men in Black in the alley. He happens to be standing beside a rat, and he drops the turtles and the mutagen. They turn into men, or they turn into themselves because they was exposed to him as a human, and he just happened to be standing next to a rat. And this is kind of the way that the mutations take off in the show. In the first two episodes, this kind of plays out. There's sort of a con man who's working with the crane droids. He was around a bunch of plants. He turns into some kind of fucking snakeweed creature. And the second episode is an asshole with a cell phone who happens to capture the turtles on video. He gets captured by the crane. They go and rescue him, and in the scuffle, his cell phone gets knocked away, and one of the things, a mutagen spills on him, and there just happens to be a spider around, and he turns into this weird spider-looking thing. And that's usually the circumstance for the mutations in this show. As it goes on, there are other ideas that are brought in here, namely to do with the fact that you don't necessarily have to be human and exposed to an animal in order to get mutated. Just whatever it is you're around, it be plants. There's an interesting thing that they do with this kid who kind of idolizes the turtles, and since he was exposed to nothing, he just winds up turning into the show's version of the Mutagen Man. And they even do an interesting twist with animals that were around people, and they wind up turning into mutants that are still animals, but they just have human intelligence and human attributes, which I thought was really interesting for the show to do. Concerning the Krang, I'm kind of surprised that for the first half of the season, nobody bothers to fucking explain what the Krang are doing there. They're just running around and they're setting up mutagen bombs, or they're kidnapping scientists for a reason which does get discussed later on. And it just vexes me that none of the Turtles actually just decide to go and just out and out ask, where are these guys coming from and what are they doing here? It's just kind of a normalcy for them. With the Shredder in this, because the first half of the season does build up to his eventually facing off with the Turtles. There's kind of this funny thing to where there's this Chuck Norris knockoff who actually is one of the Shredder's students, and there's kind of this funny thing to where Mikey turns into a fanboy after he sees the guy and decides to be his Facebook friend, and actually the guy just winds up using Mikey to trap the Turtles, which is really cool. He's kind of, he's obviously just a spoiled rich asshole who was trained by the Shredder, and then we have this streetwise guy who comes in there and actually, in some ways, has better moves than the guy who was trained a lot in the karate studios. Actually uses a lot of breakdancing moves. That was awesome. And actually, at the point where they first encountered the Shredder, they're sort of set up to be his Rocksteady and Bebop for the duration of this season, which I thought was really cool. What they wind up turning into, though, is not Rocksteady and Bebop. I have no idea what those mutants are that they become, or if they, if they were just something that was used in the past in another show or comic, or they were just something that was made up strictly for the show. But I do kind of grow on them after a while. Karai, when she's brought into this, is interesting. If April is kind of the crush that Donatello develops in the series, Leonardo's interest obviously will be in Karai, and she's just more of his Catwoman than anything else. There's something really interesting that they do with her. She has a connection to one of the protagonists, based on the backstories and about how she came into the service of the Shredder that they drop in the season finale. Which, the thing about this is, it's kind of doing some of the foreshadowing style things, and then it pays off later in Iron Man Armored Adventures type fashion. I called it, but it was still a really good moment. I really enjoyed it. But she's a really good character. Kelly Hu actually does her voice, which is another piece of awesome. The only thing is, when Donatello and Leonardo start getting quote-unquote love interest in this series, I'm surprised that they haven't done it for Raph and Mikey yet. Really, the only thing I could envision for Raph is the Mona Lisa lizard from the 90s Turtle series, and I have no idea who you could go with for Mikey. But there are other things that they do in here too. Baxter Stockman is dropped in here. Baxter Stockman is basically just Eddie. To me, he seems like Eddie Murphy playing the Nutty Professor, except that he's not the fat guy. He's just more like combine Sherman Klump with Steve Urkel. That's the best way to describe him, and just make him evil. There's an there's an episode devoted to him, where he's just working by himself, and then there's another point where he gets recruited by the Foot, which is pretty cool. The way that they build up to things, as the series will go on into the season, it does start pulling more nuances back from the 90s series into this. We will get the Technodrome. We will get the Krang, who are just running around doing crazy stuff. They do have a leader that they answer to. They do tell where they come from, and some of the other side mutants that they bring in here are really cool. I've seen a foreshadow in this dropped for Slash, possibly, and we already have Leatherhead brought into the series. I think outside of the main protagonists, I really like their take on Leatherhead, who just, by the way, even in this animation, looks fucking awesome. And his voice actor is really cool, too. Overall, the series, it is kind of a hard way to get through with the first few episodes. It's going to be kind of annoying if you don't like Ultimate Spider-Man or Teen Titans, but keep watching it a little bit. If you have kids, you will probably be able to get into it a little bit easier than you would if you were just kind of watching this by yourself. But there's just a lot of good stuff set up in here, and I really want to see what they're going to wind up doing with the second season, especially with the facts that we're supposed to be getting Casey Jones and what was the other one? I think Usagi Yojimbo and maybe even the Neutrinos who might show up in here. I really enjoyed this, and there's a lot of good things to look forward to in the second season. If you were someone who had kids and grew up with this in the 90s and kind of wondering maybe you might not be able to enjoy this if you're watching it with your kids, there are things that can nod back to the series that you grew up with if you haven't watched it in years and just kind of enjoy it. If you're a person who has not watched this series and you kind of have the bias that this may not be as good as the 90s series or the 2000 series, or nowhere near as good as the fucking awesome comic that Kevin Eastman is doing at IDW right now, this is a really good series. It's not going to be great, but it's going to be really good if you give it some time and just work your way into it. I would definitely recommend this.